JP Morgan Chase. I mean, it just seems like they are the undisputed king of American finance. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You see their towering buildings in pretty much every major city.
Yeah, and their logos are on your credit cards. You naturally assume they run the whole economy.
Right. It's a very easy assumption to make.
But there's a sleeping giant out there with significantly deeper pockets and, frankly, way more trust. And right now, it's waking up.
It really is.
So today we are taking a deep dive into this really compelling article by Bruce Stewart. It's from the Metallicus Community, dated May 24, 2026.
Yeah, great piece.
And we're looking at it alongside this highly detailed conceptual infographic that it breaks down the Metallicus digital banking architecture.
Which is incredibly dense, but so fascinating once you get into it.
Exactly. So the mission for today's deep dive is for us to decode this massive shift happening in the financial sector for you. Because the future of digital finance isn't about, Silicon Valley tech platforms completely replacing your local bank.
No, not at all.
It's actually about upgrading the fundamental plumbing of the community institutions we already rely on.
Yeah, upgrading the pipes, basically.
Right. And there's this quote from Marshall Hayner in the source material that it immediately reframes this entire landscape. He says, what's bigger than JP Morgan? The other 4,336 banks and 4,287 credit unions combined.
That quote is just wild. It completely shatters that whole apex predator myth of the financial world.
Right.
Because we're so conditioned to just focus on those 4 or 5 mega banks.
Right.
We completely ignore the sheer mass of the ecosystem right beneath them.
Oh, for sure.
Like when you actually aggregate the capital and the customer base of those 8,600 plus local institutions, you realize they are the foundational roots actually holding the entire economy in place.
Okay, let's unpack this, because understanding the scale of these community banks completely changes how we view their current technology.
100%.
I mean, we tend to view big Wall Street banks like giant, dominant national chain stores, right?
Yes.
Assuming they just run the whole economy. Yep. But community banks and credit unions, they're the thousands of essential local businesses that actually hold the entire country's infrastructure together. We know they have the loyal customers, massive localized deposits, and this deep-rooted generational trust.
Yeah, they're the ones financing the local bakeries, the regional construction firms, the neighborhood initiatives, all of that.
Exactly. But here is my fundamental disconnect. If these thousands of community banks have all the trust and mountains of capital, why do their mobile apps feel like they were designed in 1998?
It's a great question.
I mean, why does it take 3 days for a check to clear at my local credit union when some centralized tech company can beam money across the globe in 3 seconds? It's like they have this beautiful, highly trusted vintage car, but they're trying to race it on a modern, high-speed digital superhighway against Formula One teams.
That is a perfect way to put it. And the answer is because possessing capital for lending is it's entirely different from possessing capital for massive software engineering.
Oh, I see.
Right. Building proprietary, high-speed technological rails from scratch is astronomically expensive.
Because it's not just making an app, it's the whole back end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A global megabank can afford to employ thousands of in-house developers to build custom digital infrastructure. But a credit union serving, a county of 50,000 people, they just cannot do that.
So what do?
Well, they're trapped relying on third-party legacy core providers. These are back-end systems that were fundamentally architected in the 70s and 80s. They're essentially renting old, rigid plumbing.
Wow. So they have a monopoly on local trust, but they're bleeding younger customers because the digital experience is just so clunky.
Precisely.
And that gap between profound community trust and outdated back-end tech, that seems to be exactly what Metallicus is trying to bridge here.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the massive paradigm shift this reveals about the broader crypto and Web3 space.
How so?
Well, for the last decade, the loudest narrative was purely about disruption.
Oh, yeah. Burn it down, right?
Exactly. The rallying cry was always disrupt the banks or bypass the legacy system. But as the Bruce Stewart article points out, the smarter practical strategy isn't burning down the old system. The actual future of finance is blockchain upgrading banking infrastructure.
Upgrading, not replacing.
Yes. The banking sector is no longer asking if blockchain matters. They're urgently trying to figure out how to integrate it safely into the core systems they already use.
Which brings us directly into the Metallicus architecture detailed in the infographic. Because the central premise is stated right at the top. It says, the best tech in crypto and Web3 isn't chasing hype, it's building the rails.
Building the rails. That's the key.
Right, so we are definitively moving away from that era of speculative tokens into an era of pure utility. But I really want to dig into the actual mechanics of these rails. The materials emphasize a regulatory-first architecture and prominently feature pillars like built for compliance and built for financial institutions.
And those pillars are the difference between, a cool technology experiment and actual mainstream financial adoption.
Makes sense.
I mean, if you are a heavily regulated community bank, you cannot touch a piece of technology no matter how lightning fast it is if it puts your banking charter at risk.
Right. You can't just play fast and loose with people's mortgages.
Exactly. You simply can't route customer funds through anonymous, opaque networks. It's a non-starter.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I look at this built for compliance mandate, and it feels like an oxymoron to the original ethos of crypto.
It does, yeah.
Right. The whole origin story of Web3 was about bypassing regulators. So how does Metallicus build a blockchain system that is strictly built for compliance? Like, what does that actually look like under the hood?
It looks like WebAuth identity, which is one of the core protocols outlined in their infrastructure stack.
WebAuth.
Yeah. Instead of the traditional crypto model where wallets are just these anonymous strings of letters and numbers, WebAuth functions fundamentally as a cryptographically secure digital notary.
Oh, a digital notary.
Right. It attaches a verified real-world identity to the digital wallet right at the protocol level.
But wait, without broadcasting someone's personal information to the public blockchain. Right. Because privacy is still a thing.
Exactly. No, your info isn't public.
Yeah.
The identity verification happens securely, satisfying all the necessary anti-money laundering and KYC, know your customer requirements.
Okay, good.
But the public doesn't see your passport or social security number on the ledger. What it does is provide the bank with the cryptographic proof that the transaction is compliant.
So if a regulator comes knocking...
If a regulator knocks on the credit union's door and audits a transaction, the bank can instantly prove who was on both sides of that transfer. That solves the massive compliance hurdle that has kept traditional finance away from public ledgers for so long.
That's huge. Let's talk about the specific architecture handling those transfers, too, because the infographic lists L2 and A-chain infrastructure, as well as private subnets.
Yeah, the networking side.
Right. And if I'm playing devil's advocate here, doesn't creating private lanes and subnets kind of defeat the whole decentralized open network idea? Why not just put the banks on a main public blockchain?
Well, because a public global blockchain is like a massive public highway.
Okay.
It's incredibly secure. But during rush hour, it gets really congested. And the toll fees, the gas fees, they can spike unpredictably.
Oh, right. When everyone's trying to trade at once.
Exactly. A community bank cannot tell a customer, hey, your mortgage payment is going to cost an extra $50 in network fees today because the network is busy. They'd lose their minds.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly at all.
That's where L2 or layer 2 infrastructure comes in. Think of L2 as a dedicated high-speed local processing lane running perfectly parallel to the main highway.
Oh, I like that.
The brain can process thousands of transactions in this local lane instantly and for fractions of a penny. And then only the final aggregated receipt gets stamped onto the main hyper-secure layer 1 highway.
So they get the security of the main chain, but the speed and cost efficiency of a private network.
Yes, and the A-chain component specifically refers to an avalanche-based architecture.
Okay, and why does avalanche matter for the banks?
It comes down to consensus speed. When a bank is moving millions of dollars between accounts, they cannot wait 10 minutes for block confirmations.
Right. Time is money.
They need what we call sub-second finality. A-chain architecture provides that. The moment the transaction is processed, it is irreversibly settled in under a second.
Under a second, wow.
Yeah. Combine that speed with a private subnet, which is a dedicated compliant lane just for verified institutions, and you have a system where traditional banks actually feel entirely safe operating.
I see. So they aren't just giving the banks a fast car. They are essentially building a brightly lit, heavily patrolled, high-speed toll road specifically designed for these trusted institutions to drive on.
That is the perfect way to visualize the transition, yeah. They are eliminating the operational friction of legacy systems while ensuring complete interoperability in a heavily regulated environment.
Okay, so we know Metallicus is building these compliant, high-speed back-end rails with WebAuth and A-chain subnets, but we need to translate this back-end plumbing into front-end reality.
Right, the user experience.
Exactly. So What does this all mean for you, the person listening right now, when you actually interact with your bank? Because L2 infrastructure sounds great in a boardroom, but how does this hit the street level? The sources list tangible tools here. Stablecoins, specifically the metal dollar, tokenized deposits, instant payments, compliant DeFi, and self-custody wallets.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, all of these tools represent a fundamental shift toward programmable money.
Programmable money.
Right. And to understand what that actually means for the consumer, we really have to look at tokenized deposits.
Let's dig into that mechanism. Because right now, if I deposit a check or receive a traditional wire, the bank updates a database. But the actual settlement, the underlying movement of the money between the institutions, is notoriously slow.
Oh, it's painfully slow. Think of a traditional bank deposit like a massive block of ice.
A block of ice.
Yeah, it has value, it's secure, but it is heavy, it is incredibly slow to move, and it takes days to melt down into liquid cash that you can actually spend or transfer across different institutions.
Right, sitting in pending status for days.
Exactly. When a local credit union uses the Metallicus digital banking network to create a tokenized deposit, they're essentially turning that block of ice into water.
Oh, I see.
The value is converted into a compliant digital token on the Metal blockchain. Suddenly, that capital can flow instantly through the digital pipes, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
To put a real-world scenario to that, say you run a small local construction business. Currently, if a client pays you for a massive job late on a Friday afternoon via traditional banking rails, you might not actually have access to those cleared funds until Tuesday.
Exactly, because of weekends and bank holidays.
Right. That delay restricts your ability to buy materials for Monday morning or even make payroll over the weekend. Your capital is basically frozen.
And that freeze creates massive economic friction. But with a tokenized deposit and instant payments on this blockchain infrastructure, the moment the client hits send, the funds physically settle in your account with sub-second finality.
Boom. Done.
Right. Money shouldn't sleep just because the physical brick-and-mortar bank branch locked its doors at 5 p.m.
It's like moving from an analog postal service model, draping a letter in a box and just hoping it arrives in 3 days, to sending a secure text message, but with bank-level security baked into every character.
That's exactly what it is.
But what about the services beyond just moving money? The infographic heavily features Metallicus and compliant DeFi. How does decentralized finance, which is usually Wild West crypto stuff, fit into a highly regulated community bank?
Well, this is where the playing field truly levels. Normally, complex, high-yield financial products like sophisticated lending, liquidity provisioning, advanced asset trading, those are strictly the domain of massive investment banks.
Right, Wall Street stuff.
Exactly. A local credit union simply doesn't have the back-end infrastructure to offer those services. But Metallicus acts as a compliant DeFi hub.
Compliant being the key word.
Yes. It allows a local bank to plug their customers into decentralized lending and trading protocols safely. Because the entire subnet is fortified with that WebAuth identity verification we discussed earlier, the bank can offer DeFi yields to their members without violating their regulatory charter.
Wow. So what you're really saying is that we're completely decoupling the size of a bank's geographic footprint from the sophistication of its technology.
Precisely.
A credit union with 3 branches in Ohio can suddenly offer the exact same instantaneous settlement, 247 liquidity and high-tech lending services as a global mega bank in Manhattan.
And that's precisely the point of the Bruce Stewart article. The opportunity Metallicus is chasing isn't about building one giant new centralized fintech app to crush all the local banks. The real opportunity is the network effect. It is taking these thousands of smaller, fiercely independent institutions that already hold the deposits and the local trust, and seamlessly linking them together onto a single, unified digital financial network.
It's kind of like the Voltron effect. You take 8,623 individual, highly trusted local units, and when they share the same instantaneous, frictionless L2 rails, they combine into a massive, highly efficient digital entity.
Exactly. They become a powerhouse.
They can collectively go toe-to-toe with the biggest financial monopolies in the world without losing the local relationships that make them valuable in the first place.
Which perfectly illustrates why the industry's shift from hype to utility is just so critical. Hype sells speculative tokens to day traders. Utility sells foundational infrastructure to established institutions.
Well said.
And when institutions adopt blockchain infrastructure on this scale, that is when the financial reality actually changes for the average consumer. You won't necessarily know you're using an A-chain subnet. You will just know your mortgage cleared instantly on a Sunday morning.
Which brings us to the overarching takeaway of this deep dive. The biggest technological opportunity in fintech right now isn't about Silicon Valley trying to disrupt Wall Street.
No, it's not.
It is about empowering Main Street. It's about outfitting local institutions with the digital architecture they need to activate the capital they already hold. Think back to that initial quote from Marshall Hayner.
Oh, the JP Morgan one.
Right. You know what's bigger than JP Morgan? The other 4,336 banks and 4,287 credit unions combined. Over the course of this breakdown, our entire perception of what a major financial network looks like has shifted.
Totally flipped.
The true giants aren't just the centralized household names anymore. The sleeping giant is the collective force of every small-town bank and local credit union, finally plugging into a modern, programmable digital grid.
And this is where the theory becomes something you can actually observe in your own life. The next time you walk or drive past your local community bank, try looking at it through a different lens. Don't view it as a nostalgic relic of a slower financial era. View it as a dormant node in a new digital asset economy. They already possess the hardest things to acquire in finance: the regulatory charter, the deposits, and the community ties.
They already won the hard part.
Exactly. Once they integrate a regulatory-first blockchain backend, they transform from legacy institutions into the tip of the spear for financial innovation. This raises an important question.
If thousands of local credit unions suddenly share the exact same instantaneous, programmable financial infrastructure as the Wall Street giants, could the power dynamic of the entire global economy fundamentally shift?
It's a huge thought.
What happens to the dominance of massive centralized financial capitals when your local neighborhood bank is actually faster, more agile, and completely globally connected? It is definitely something to seriously think about the next time you open your banking app. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.